The Book of Genesis stands as the foundational text for Judaism and Christianity. It narrates the beginnings of the world, humanity, and the Israelite people. Genesis recounts creation, the first humans, the Great Flood, and the lives of the patriarchs. Scholars believe it was compiled from various sources over many centuries. The Book of Jubilees offers a fascinating retelling of Genesis and the early chapters of Exodus. It is often called the Little Genesis, or Leptogenesis. This work was written much later than the canonical Genesis, probably in the 2nd century BCE. Jubilees presents itself as a revelation given to Moses on Mount Sinai by an angel. The book divides this history into periods of 49 years known as Jubilees. Jubilees shares many stories with Genesis but also expands, omits, and alters details. These changes reflect the theological concerns of its author and community. Jubilees aims to show that the Mosaic law, including festivals and purity rules, was observed by the patriarchs. It also emphasizes a strict solar calendar of 364 days. Understanding Jubilees requires comparing it closely with Genesis. This comparison reveals how ancient Jewish writers engaged with their sacred traditions. Jubilees is a testament to the dynamic nature of scriptural interpretation. The creation account in Genesis 1 famously describes God creating the world in 6 days. Each day brings forth new elements of the cosmos: light, sky, land, vegetation, celestial bodies, sea creatures, birds, and finally land animals and humans appear. God speaks, and it comes into being. The 7th day is consecrated as a day of rest, establishing the Sabbath. Jubilees presents a creation narrative that largely follows the structure of Genesis 1, but introduces significant additions. One notable feature is the explicit mention of angels being created on the first day. This early creation of angels sets the stage for their later roles in Jubilees' worldview. Jubilees stresses that the pattern of work and Sabbath rest was established from the very beginning. Creation itself becomes a blueprint for the divine ordering of time and human observance. Jubilees provides more detail about the specific works of each creation day. The story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is central to Genesis. It explains the origin of sin and human suffering. Genesis 3 describes the serpent tempting Eve. She eats the forbidden fruit and gives some to Adam. Their disobedience leads to expulsion from Eden. They face consequences like painful childbirth, toilsome labor, and mortality. Jubilees retells the story of the fall with significant expansions and theological reinterpretations. It specifies the exact timeline of events. Adam and Eve are in the garden for 7 years before the transgression. The book also introduces the figure of Mastema, the chief of evil spirits. While the serpent is the agent of temptation, Mastema is often implied to be the power behind it. The consequences of the fall in Jubilees are also detailed. Adam and Eve are expelled from Eden on a specific day, aligning with Jubilees' chronological framework. Jubilees often connects these events to the later institution of laws and festivals. A key difference lies in Jubilees' emphasis on the role of evil spirits. After the fall, these spirits, led by Mastema, continue to plague humanity. The fall is not just a past event but the beginning of an ongoing struggle between good and evil forces. Genealogies play a crucial role in the Book of Genesis. They connect different narratives and establish the lineage of the Israelite people. Genesis provides lists of descendants for Adam, Noah, and the patriarchs. These genealogies often include the lifespans of individuals. Jubilees takes the genealogical information from Genesis and systematizes it. It fits these lineages into its overarching Jubilee calendar. Each birth, death, and significant event is meticulously dated. Jubilees aims to provide a precise chronology from creation onwards. The lifespans recorded in Jubilees generally align with those in the Masoretic text of Genesis. However, Jubilees sometimes adds names or details about the wives of the patriarchs. The purpose of genealogies in Jubilees extends beyond mere record-keeping. They reinforce the book's theological agenda. By dating events precisely, Jubilees demonstrates that history unfolds according to a divine plan. The regular succession of generations highlights God's control over time. Jubilees often uses genealogies to introduce moral or legal teachings. The genealogies become vehicles for instruction. Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 to 4 briefly mentions the sons of God who took human wives. Their offspring were the Nephilim, described as mighty men of old. This enigmatic passage precedes the account of the flood. Genesis attributes the flood to widespread human wickedness. God decides to cleanse the earth, saving only Noah and his family. Jubilees greatly expands the story of the sons of God, whom it identifies as watchers, a class of angels. They taught humans forbidden knowledge such as sorcery, astrology, and warfare. They also mated with human women, producing giant offspring called Nephilim. This angelic sin is presented as a major source of corruption on earth. Jubilees places significant blame on these rebellious angels for the wickedness that led to the flood. The flood narrative in Jubilees follows the broad outlines of Genesis. Noah is instructed to build an ark. He takes his family and pairs of animals aboard. The floodwaters cover the earth, destroying all other life. After the flood, Jubilees describes the binding of the watchers and the fate of their offspring, the Nephilim. The evil spirits that plague humanity are said to have originated from the deceased Nephilim. Following the flood, Genesis describes God establishing a covenant with Noah. This covenant is made with Noah, his descendants, and all living creatures. God promises never again to destroy the earth by a flood. The rainbow is given as a sign of this everlasting covenant. Genesis 9 also includes commandments given to Noah and his sons. Jubilees recounts Noah's covenant, emphasizing its importance and eternal nature. Jubilees 6 elaborates on the laws given to Noah. It presents these laws as foundational for all future generations. The book includes prohibitions against eating blood, covering shed blood, and fornication. It also mandates the observance of certain festivals, particularly the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot. The Tower of Babel story in Genesis 11 explains the origin of different languages and the scattering of peoples. Humanity, united in speech, attempts to build a city and a tower to reach the heavens. God confuses their language, causing them to disperse across the earth. Jubilees retells the Tower of Babel story in chapter 10. It emphasizes that the division of the earth among Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, occurred by lot before the Babel incident. This division was divinely ordained. The book of Genesis dedicates a significant portion to the life of Abraham. He is portrayed as the father of the Israelite nation. God calls Abraham to leave his homeland and promises him numerous descendants and a special land. Abraham's faith is tested multiple times, most notably in the binding of Isaac, or the Akedah. Genesis highlights his obedience and his covenant relationship with God. Jubilees presents Abraham in a similar light but with added emphases. A key theme in Jubilees is Abraham's rejection of idolatry. Jubilees describes Abraham at a young age recognizing the futility of worshipping idols. He even sets fire to his father Terah's idol workshop. Jubilees also portrays Abraham as a meticulous observer of the law, long before it was given at Sinai. He is said to have observed festivals, Sabbath laws, and purity regulations. The covenant with Abraham is detailed in Jubilees, with specific dates according to its calendar. The Akedah, the binding of Isaac, is also recounted. Abraham's successful passing of the test further solidifies his status as a righteous exemplar. Genesis provides extensive narratives about Jacob and his twin brother Esau. Their rivalry begins in the womb and continues throughout their lives. Jacob famously acquires Esau's birthright and Isaac's blessing through deception. He then flees to Haran, where he marries Leah and Rachel and has many children. Jacob's life is marked by struggle, including his wrestling match with a divine being. Eventually he reconciles with Esau and returns to Canaan. Jubilees retells the stories of Jacob and Esau, often intensifying the negative portrayal of Esau. While Genesis shows a later reconciliation, Jubilees maintains a more antagonistic view of Esau and his descendants, the Edomites. Jubilees describes ongoing conflict and even a war between Jacob's sons and Esau's sons, where Esau is killed. The Joseph story in Genesis is a tale of betrayal, suffering, and eventual triumph. Joseph is sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. He rises to prominence in Egypt through his ability to interpret dreams. Jubilees recounts Joseph's story, again with its characteristic emphasis on law, observance, and chronology. A central conceptual parallel and point of divergence is the understanding of law, or Torah. Genesis contains laws such as the Noahide commandments and the covenant of circumcision. However, the full Mosaic law is given later at Sinai as described in Exodus. Jubilees, conversely, posits that the entire Torah, including festival observances and purity rules, existed from creation. The patriarchs knew and observed these laws. The calendar system is another critical area. Genesis operates with a less defined calendrical framework. Jubilees champions a 364-day solar calendar. This calendar consists of 52 weeks, with each quarter having 13 weeks. Jubilees vehemently opposes lunar calendars, which were used by other Jewish groups. Angelology is far more developed in Jubilees than in Genesis. Genesis mentions angels in various roles, like messengers and destroyers. However, Jubilees provides a more elaborate hierarchy and classification of angels. It names specific angels like the angel of the presence who dictates the book to Moses. It also introduces Mastema, the chief of evil spirits, who actively opposes God's people. This dualistic worldview, with a constant struggle between good and evil angelic forces, is prominent in Jubilees.